I talk in my book, Simple Story Selling, about the 4 types of story you can tell in your marketing. Maybe 4 types of story, full stop really. One is product stories, another is customer stories. Product and customer stories are really the same thing but told from different voices. Product stories being from your voice, customer stories being from your customer's voice, testimonials, endorsements, that kind of thing. The third story type is personal stories, which is really where I spend a lot of my time. Personal stories are often the missing elements for businesses who sell based on trust. For personal brands, you really need to be telling your personal story. The fourth story type is what I call other stories, which is stories about other events, other historical events, other goings on in the world. You can talk about these things. Not every story you ever tell has to be your story, which is a relief to most of my clients. The main thing to understand about story selection is that nobody who's brand new to you, so nobody who discovered you 6 seconds ago, wants to hear your life story yet. This is what I call the storytelling boomerang, where we start off, if you think about the boomerang, so the boomerang departs very close to your hand, and we start off by telling stories or crafting messaging that is very close to the problem. Initially, you can only get someone's attention by talking about the problem that they are currently facing, because people's mental narrative is mostly interested in themselves, or potentially their kids and other people close to them, but it's solving problems that captures people's attention. It's not hearing your story, at least to begin with. So to begin with, you can't rock up and start bleeding your deepest, darkest personal stories to brand new people. I see quite a lot of this on LinkedIn, like these, in many respects perhaps dramatic overshares, and I kind of like that. I half like that people do it because it feels in some respects vulnerable and real, but the fact that it's on LinkedIn means that people are probably doing it as this is me being cynical. I would suspect that some people are doing it to attract attention. Otherwise, why else would you put it on LinkedIn? But if you're immediately steaming in very quickly and telling your personal story, it makes you a little bit like the crazy person on the bus. When you get on a bus and someone gets on and you can just tell that they've got these vibes, and out of all of the places to sit on the bus, they sit next to you and they look you in the eye and they want to chat. They want to tell you about their day. They want to tell you about their morning. In Sheffield, we have a tram system and we use the tram quite a bit. My wife Lindsay seems to attract all of the crazies on the tram. Like, they never want to speak to me. I don't know what it is. I just don't have very approachable vibes, funnily enough. They always gravitate towards Lindsay. They always sit next to her. They always want to chat. But if you're coming in very quickly and telling your personal story too quickly, it makes you a little bit like the crazy person on the bus, and people aren't ready for it yet. So you need to capture attention first by talking about the problem, and talking about the problem very, very eloquently. So in your ads, in your lead generation, it's almost like people want to see your ad and feel like you're almost looking over their shoulder at their day and understanding their problems and the dilemmas that they face even better than they do themselves. That's really where the rubber hits the road in terms of the starting point of the customer journey. As the boomerang travels further out though, so once you got someone's attention, most of the people watching or listening to this show, if you're like my clients, then you sell high value, transformational products or services that are probably quite expensive, or at least you have some kind of expensive product offering where people will have to invest quite a bit to work with you. So it's not a transactional thing. So people are going to have to get to know you. They're not just going to sign up straight away. Initially, if they do sign up straight away, then they're going to be a pain because they just view you as a vendor. So they have to get to know you. So once you've got their attention, once they're in your world, once they've opted in for your lead magnet, once they've subscribed to your email list, followed you on LinkedIn and whatever else, then you need to be telling your personal story. I happen to think that places like LinkedIn are not really the place for opening a vein and bleeding a little. Yes, you do want to open a vein and bleed a little. That phrase, actually, open a vein and bleed a little, comes directly from Perry Marshall, who was one of my mentors. And he says in your marketing, at some point, when for people to really get to know, like, and trust you, you do have to be open and honest about the deepest things that you've faced. So once people have opted in, once they've had some value from you, once they've positioned you in their brain as a potential solution to a long-running problem that they're trying to solve, or if not long-running, at least a burning and pressing problem, then you need to transition yourself from being in a category of many to a category of one. And that's where your personal story comes in. So if you think about the boomerang going out, we started off being very problem focused, very direct to the problem people are currently facing. There might be an element of story, but we're not deviating very far from customer stories and personal stories. And as the boomerang goes out, you take this little loop around your personal story. You don't tell them the whole thing. You don't sit there for 4 hours giving people your life story, but you give people a little tour of the main events, and then you loop back to the offer. So then you come back, a week or so later, or 2 weeks later, or whatever the sensible nurture period happens to be for you and your audience. You loop back to the offer and you make an invite. And this keeps going around, actually. You keep throwing the boomerang. So you come back to the offer, and then some people are ready, some people are not. For some people, the time isn't right yet, so they don't have the money right now, or they don't have the decision-making capability. So then you throw the boomerang again, and you give them another tour of the story. Perhaps second time round, the boomerang goes a bit further out, and you include a few more stories that you hadn't told first time round. So this is really an ongoing thing. In my work, I focus a lot of attention on the onboarding period after you first generate leads for your business. Because if you can get that onboarding period right, people will stick around and they'll open emails for quite a long time into the future, if you can get the onboarding right. If you get the onboarding wrong, it's very hard to fix later on, because you just show up in their inbox and people are like, who the hell is this guy? So on today's episode, I'm going to give you a little tour of what are now the 5 core story prompts that I'm using for myself and for clients to give people that initial orientation. It's not definitive. It's not the only 5 stories that you're ever going to tell, but these are the 5 prompts. I'm always trying to make this formulaic. So on last week's episode, I explored one aspect of story selection, which is to just get going, telling the stories that you want to tell, telling the stories that come to mind. That's one thing, and letting the content emerge out of those stories. But people do often ask, when people opt in, okay, which stories should I prioritize? Are there specific prompts I should look at first? So I've got 5 of those prompts to talk you through at a top level today. And then over the coming episodes, we'll take a look in depth at each individual prompt. So each of the next 5 episodes after this will almost become like a guide as you work through each of these stories. The first story prompt you're going to work on, and the first story you tell to people after they've opted in, after they've downloaded the lead magnets and maybe had a welcome email, the first story I would tell them is what I call grounding principles. And grounding principles are the things that you come back to pretty much on a daily basis. It's your modus operandi. It's the way that you do things. So for me, my grounding principle story is barefoot running. It's the thing that has probably had the biggest, given that I'm a runner and like most runners, I struggle with injuries from time to time. It's had the biggest transformation on both my running and, I would argue, my mental health and general well-being. It's also, coming back to story selection, it's also the perfect story to tell to illustrate grounding principles, because barefoot running is literally a grounding activity. So it's got quite a tight connection to the message as well, I guess. But so grounding principles is the first story prompt, and we'll cover that on next week's episode. The second core story prompt that I've come to is the controlling idea. So the way to think about your controlling idea is that if you think about your world of all of the things that you talk about, write about, communicate about, the controlling idea is like the boundary rope around the outside. And it dictates, it's a binary yes or no. Is this something that you should be talking about, or is this not something you should be talking about? So in my world, my controlling idea is trust. Trust in trust in marketing has been ripped to shreds by scumbags. So the question is what we're doing helping to authentically build trust at scale? That's what I'm all about. That's what my work's all about. If anything, so it actually doesn't. I actually don't really care what the media is. If it's Meta ads, TikTok ads, whatever, email, direct mail. I'm not really very focused on any particular media. The question is it authentically building trust? That's the binary thing of, is it in Rob's world or is it outside of Rob's world? So what is your boundary, Rob? So that's the second core story prompt. And I'm giving you all of these just to get you thinking ahead of the next few episodes, because this isn't just going to be a listen to these episodes and go, oh, that's interesting, Rob. I'm challenging you to write these stories, and perhaps not even write the stories, but at least talk about the stories, verbalize the stories first. So that was the second prompt. The third core story prompt is what I call self-understanding. It's pinpointing one event from your past on your professional development that has led your business to where it is today. It's pinpointing one event, perhaps one journey or quest. Self-understanding events are rarely happen when you're sitting at your desk in your office, tapping away at the keyboard. Big jumps in self-understanding come from putting yourself in challenging situations. And it might not even be a business-related situation. It could be a trip that you've made, or a time that you spent in a different culture, for instance. But what was that event? What was that event that caused you to reevaluate your understanding of your topic? So for me, that event was a trip I made to Chicago to help out at one of Perry Marshall's events, and I talk about that. I'll share that story in detail in a few weeks. So have a think about different options. There's probably going to be quite a few options for self-understanding, because we're all beings in progress. So there will be multiple choices here, and it's a case of, from a story selection perspective, picking the one that has the highest emotional power, really. The fourth core story prompt then is the key insight. The key insight that your audience tends to miss, the biggest misunderstanding, and how you came, and then specifically how you personally came to understand this misunderstanding in a different way and see it from a different perspective. So for me, my key insight was realizing that storytelling was a process that I could break down and teach. I always thought that storytelling was a gift to the gab that you either had or you didn't, that you were good at it or you weren't. And then I went to Sean D'Souza's storytelling workshop in Amsterdam, and it turned everything on its head. So I'll tell you that story in a few weeks, but have a think about, for the people who are buying your services, what misunderstandings do they have? And then how did you come to understand those things in a different way? That's the fourth prompt. The fifth prompt is a new one. Well, it's not technically a new one, it's a slightly adapted one. The fifth one is your vision for the future. And it's a slightly different story prompt in that it faces both backwards and forwards. Increasingly, what I'm getting clients to do is to collate images for a vision board of how they envision their golden future. So if everything goes to plan, what's the future that you're trying to move towards? What's the world you're trying to create? So this is why I have, if you're watching the video version, this is why I have this board behind me. This is my vision board, which is a relatively new edition. I can pull it out like this. You see, it's very shy. So apologies if you're listening to the audio version, but I'll post a video of this on the website with this episode. And this has got, but my board has got various images. It's got a motorbike on. It's got me and Lindsay looking happy. It's got a beach on Australia actually. So one of the things that I want to do is to travel around and run storytelling events in nice warm places and have small community feel type events. Maybe on the beach, maybe not on the beach. All of this is about intention setting and visualizing. So I'll post an image of that on the page that goes out with this episode. But this is about vision is a visual exercise, not specifically a words exercise. So it's quite helpful to pull these images together. And the images on my vision board are a mix of photographs from the past, things that we've done where things have felt right, things have felt in flow, things that I want to do more of, things that I want to get back to. There's a few things that are not my images. So there's an image of a mobile recording studio that's connected to my Wise Echoes work. There's an image of the pyramids. There's actually multiple pyramids on my vision board because I suspect that there's more to pyramids than meets the eye. I've got an image of someone opening a box of books, which relates to a novel that I plan to write in the future. There's an image of me running, and that's a real image. That's from doing a trail run last year, and that's to do with maintaining running and keeping running and maintaining a level of fitness. And it's always there. It's always in the background. It's there as a visual reminder. So the fifth prompt is to pull together these images to get a clearer direction of where you want to move towards, because doing that partly means that some of these things manifest just because you're getting more clarity on where you're trying to move towards. But then as a rating prompt, what you can do is you can dig down to the origin of your vision. Of like, okay, for thinking about me wanting to travel and run storytelling events among close-knit groups of entrepreneurs who are making a difference, where does the desire for that, where does the drive from that come from? Is there an event in my past which is the opposite of that? So this is a prompt that I'm still working on. So the vision prompt it's a bit like the month of January, where it both looks forward to the year ahead and backwards to the year behind. So we're looking forwards to the future we want to create. We're communicating that to potential clients that this is where we're planting a flag in the sand and saying, this is where I'm going with the business. Who wants to be on the train? But then we're also looking back in your past at the root of these visions and trying to pinpoint it to specific events that have made these visions meaningful to you. Because if we can talk about those events in the past as well, then that's going to help bring it into focus. So again, I will share a more specific story about my vision and where that came from in a few episodes' time. Today's episode has been a top-level overview into how to tell your story to new potential clients, and whether to be more direct, as in when you're creating ads and messaging to people who've only just found you a few seconds ago, and then how to infuse more personal stories when people are in your world, when people are getting to know you. And I've introduced my 5 core story prompts, my initial 5 core story prompts, let's say, for building deeper, authentic connections with those people. Over the next 5 episodes, we're going to explore those 5 core story prompts in more detail. And I'm really hoping that you'll follow along and that you'll put these into practice in your own business. What else is going on in the Story Selling Lab? It's actually only a day since I recorded the last episode, so there isn't a whole lot that has changed in the last 24 hours. It is Black Friday today, which I kind of like in some ways because you do get some quite good deals, but I also hate on a deep foundational level because it is fabricated, false matrix nonsense designed to condition people to keep spending. So yeah, that's going on today. I'm 25% looking at deals, and 75% kind of with my hood above my head, like my fingers in my ears, shouting la 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 la. So that's happening today. I'm also going to write a blog post in the next few weeks about some of the books I've read this year. So in my journal, so I maintain a day-a-page journal across the year, which currently looks like this if you're following the video version. So I have a day-a-page journal. I made a few changes to this actually in the last month or so, let's say. So I've started to write in fountain pen rather than in biro. So this is just an example. So I write every day. This isn't the sort of morning pages type creative exercise. I know that some people like to journal and they like to wake up and they like to do some like Zen meditation exercise and practice gratitude for an hour and then sit with their thoughts and then write their morning pages. It's like, you know what? I've got small kids. I don't have time for that. So I get up in the morning and I'm getting nagged about making breakfast and doing jobs and emptying the dishwasher. So my version of this is to journal at night after the little terrorists have gone to bed. And all I do really is I write about stuff that's happened in the day. I've actually found that writing in fountain pen makes me more conscientious about what I'm writing and I put more detail into it. I think it's because of the feeling of the pen, because you feel like when you're writing with a fountain pen, you have to go a bit slower, I think is one thing. You get more of a sense of the pen on the paper is another thing. And it also just feels like you're signing it feels like you're signing a peace treaty or something. So I think for journaling, it sounds silly, doesn't it? But this is what Marshall McLuhan said when he wrote, "The message is the media. The media, if you change the media, if you change the pen, it changes the message." It's like if you write a blog post on your phone and compare it to writing a blog post on your computer, the blog post that you wrote on your phone will be very different to the one you wrote on your computer, just as it would be very different to one that you've written out by hand in fountain pen. So I've been writing a journal every day for a few years now. I started maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I'm actually now going back and I'm printing out photos from certain days and stapling them into my old journals, so that each journal becomes like a scrapbook of the year. Something else I've done this year, though, on why I mention this, is because in my journal I also keep a log of the books I've read over the year. Because I read quite a lot, but I've got a terrible memory for books. I actually think it's possible for me to finish a book and immediately, if it's quite a big book, especially because the kids don't always let me read very often, so it might take me quite a while to get through a big book. So then at the end of the book, I've kind of forgotten what was going on in the start. So I could probably go back and just like loop around and start again. But this year and last year, I've maintained a rigorous reading journal of what I've been reading. And I've only read some excellent books this year, so I'm gonna write up a blog post of some of the books that I've read that you might find interesting to pick up, either in December or at the start of 2026. So I will share that over the coming weeks. That's all I have for today. I hope this has been interesting. I can't wait to speak to you next week about grounding principles.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Story Systems podcast. To make sure you never miss an episode, join my free mailing list at storysellingLab.co.uk/podcast. Please also subscribe to the show in your favourite podcast app. See you next time.